Alright guys, BLM here, back with a new video, and in this video, in conjunction with the 5-year anniversary of this channel, as I mentioned previously, I do plan on redoing a lot of the season rankings I have done in the past, and we're starting it all off with the first ever season ranking I ever did on this channel, that being season ranking for Big Brother Canada. Well, obviously I am recording this video at the time of BBCan 12, meaning that there are 11 seasons to be ranking here, which is surprisingly almost half the series ago from the last time I did this video, which that was at the start of BBCan 7, where there were only 6 seasons to rank. Here we got 11. So again, I'll be ranking these seasons based on my personal enjoyment of these seasons. I will say there are changes to this list from even the last time I had ranked these seasons, and even the new seasons that were added here are kind of scattered throughout the list. So radically different lists. And let's start off at number 11. The worst season of Big Brother Canada is, not surprisingly, BBCan 8, which I think it's a shame that this ends up being the worst season, as I felt like there was some promise at points with this season. However, obviously this is the season that ended due to COVID, so through that we obviously never got any resolution to the season. It was ended after only 4 weeks, and to add even more wonkiness to that, it was just really a train wreck throughout most of that time. I mean, week 1 we didn't get a formal eviction because someone quit the game. Week 3 we had the very icky situation between Kyle and Jamar, and both of them getting expelled and all the controversy that caused. And in week 4 we had Carol wanting to quit, which really stagnated a lot of the gameplay there. And really, it's just a shame how this season played out, considering I remember being so excited for this season when we got the cast. I remember the cast looking very strong, and I feel like on the season itself we got to see some of the dividends of that. I mean, we saw Sheldon and Brooke really running the game, and it would have been really fascinating to see how the season played out from that point forward. We saw the likes of John Luke and Hira starting to pick up the game and potentially being able to make big moves moving forward. We had Vanessa being a complete mess of a player, and that was riveting TV. Chris Wiley was on this season, who I still think to this day is one of my favorite characters to not make it to the jury phase of Big Brother Canada. Maddie was starting to become this scrappy underdog. Min Lee was a complete mess. Again, there were things to like with this season. The problem is it's obviously harmed by just the negativity that surrounds it, both from it being canceled due to COVID and also the Kyle and Jamar situation. And again, I think it's a shame, considering I felt like this season had promise at points, yet just obviously never lives up to it. And because that's at the bottom here at number 11. Number 10, we're moving on to a season that I don't even fully dislike. And this is the thing with Big Brother Canada is that Big Brother Canada, even the worst proper season here, is still a pretty decent season. I think it is by far my least favorite of the bunch, and at number 10 we do have BBCan 7. And BBCan 7 I just think is a largely unnotable season. I mean, outside of the Pretty Boys who really run the show both gameplay wise and TV wise, there's really not much else that really props up this season, where a lot of this cast has not really stuck the test of time. I feel like a lot of them just really did not come off as super notable here. Obviously the gameplay as a whole was pretty stagnant. While there was fracturing within the Pretty Boys, obviously the Pretty Boys still just run things for most of the game, with most of the other players that make it pretty far into the game being pretty bad. But through that, again, we get some great gameplay from the likes of Dane, Anthony Douglas, even Adam Pike ends up being a really great character. Again, there was some interesting struggle within the Pretty Boys of each of them kind of fighting for power at points, and we have the final 5 round, which was really great TV of Dane saving himself. Week 2 was really fun, where Mackie just blows up his own game. There are some interesting moments here and there, but to me it's just simply not as strong as the seasons that we haven't talked about yet, and because that's here at number 10. At number 9, we're moving on to a season that I was largely conflicted on, as I feel like there were points in this season where I was really enjoying myself. However, the season does leave me on a sour note, and in considering also its reputation post-season, it simply has not held up to the rest of the BBCan season. At number 9, I do have BBCan 11. And again, I enjoyed this season while it was airing, particularly early on. While week 1 was definitely rough with Zach and Ty really running things, by times of week 2, they make the big move and taking out Rob, and that kind of blows up their games, and they're taken out in week 3, which was a really explosive week. And then by the time of the jury phase, we have the likes of Kuzi, Daniel, and Anika seeming to run the game, though then proceed to lose their numbers one by one due to comp wins, which I think was fun at first, but by the time that Ty ends up going on his run towards the end of the game, I think my opinion of the season just really soured, where Ty is just simply just not likable in the slightest, but even beyond that, played pretty abhorrently for a lot of the season and seemed to only be saved just due to the fact that he kept on winning comps, and the comps that he won kind of scared other people into going after him. And it's just a season that did not play out in a way that I personally enjoyed, especially when we had these like decent moments from Daniel where he does such great social work to get himself the 3 despite all the adversity he faces, yet still doesn't pull it out at the end. Again, just having Ty as the winner of the season really soured my opinion. And then I think the thing that really soured it even more is the fact that just no one talked about the season after fact, where obviously we had no feeds, and that definitely plays a factor into lessening the experience at the time of the initial airing. But after the season, just no one talked about this season anymore. There wasn't the typical post-season content that you would expect that kind of left the season kind of forgettable. Now again, I still think there are things to like from this season. Kuzi is a great character. Renee is a great character. I think Daniel is a really interesting player. Again, the entire Zach eviction week was fantastic. It's just a season that, to me, just my overall opinion of it just completely soured towards the end of the game, largely due to Ty's comp win, where I feel like we just got pretty terrible results, because that's here number 9. Now number 8, we're moving on to a season I've dropped significantly since my original season ranking, which somehow had this in the top half. However, since then, my opinion has gone down on this season, and in many ways, I look at this season as a slightly better version of BB Can 11, and that is BB Can 4. Which, BB Can 4, again, I think there are things to like here, particularly the first half of the game. I think the first half of the season is very strong, where it is, again, this middle side of the house really playing off both sides and getting each side to take out one of their weaker members, to where we have these bigger players going after each other throughout a lot of the pre-merge, and that's really interesting. And then it all culminates in this Dallas vote off, where it is this big battle between Tim and Mitch, where Mitch comes out in front, and all that is fantastic TV. The problem is at the point that the fake double eviction happens and Kelsey gets brought back to the game and completely sinks Mitch's game due to information that she found out due to the fake double. At that point, this season just goes completely downhill, taking Mitch out of the game, who's one of the more interesting players in the game, while also just leaving Tim in a kind of unearned dominant position, but one that he then proceeds to not be able to stick to due to the Pax Bros and Kelsey just winning comp after comp after comp in the end game, to where despite we get the fantastic second double eviction of this season, where the Pax Bros initially want to nominate themselves and Cassandra ends up screwing them over, it simply just leaves the end game just really frustrating to just see the likes of Kelsey and the Pax Bros win those final comps to get to the end together, which is just such an underwhelming outcome to the season. Especially when like Tim quits in the final HOH and they just like didn't bother studying in a position where they knew that it was going to be quiz comps at the end. And again, it's just a very frustrating season. Again, one that did again have great moments early on. Again, the back and forth between these two warring sides with the middle playing off of them, and that fantastic Dallas eviction. It really makes it an all-time great pre-jury, but just the post-jury is just so bad, where outside of the double, there's really nothing truly great within it. And mixing that with the fact that this cast is kind of lackluster, probably one of the worst, definitely one of the lesser BB Can casts, where outside the likes of Tim, Cassandra, and Nikki Graham, a lot of the rest of the cast doesn't really pop as massive characters. There are especially being a lot of duds, especially that get booted early on. So again, like overall, a season that I understand why I put it as high as I did back then, as again, I was a big Tim Dormer fan, and also again, the first half is fantastic, but everything just completely crumbles after that. And because it's really terrible end game, I do have it here at number 8. Now number 7, we're moving on to a season that I always find tough to assess because I have a lot of nostalgia for this season. This is a season I also just rewatched not too long ago and really enjoyed still. But at number 7, I am still going to land BB Can 1. And BB Can 1, it's a pretty solid, consistent middle tier season. While there are a couple weeks that are very slow, particularly like the Suzette eviction week, I mean, for the most part, it's a solid season. Like, it can be lacking in terms of gameplay at points, particularly the end game, which is mostly stagnant with just the Beast Coast Alliance constantly winning comps over and over again and really running the show. But it still has a pretty entertaining cast. I mean, you obviously have the likes of Gary, you have Tala, you have Andrew, I think is an interesting character. Emmett is a pretty interesting character. You have Peter and Alec. Early on, you have Tom and Liza. Anil was a pretty fun character. Again, this is a pretty solid cast all around. I just simply think in comparison to future seasons, it's just not as notable. Or outside of the Jillian and Emmett storyline, and obviously the really crazy ending at the end of Topaz voting incorrectly and costing Gary the game, I feel like the season doesn't really pop as much as future seasons. And mixing that with the fact that there's these very obvious growing pains of the series, with there being some pretty unfair twists and some lower production value. Again, like, it just it's good. It's still a fine season, but I just think the other ones are a bit better, and because of that, for me, it's here at number 7. Number 6, we're moving on to a season that is probably the toughest season to assess of them all, because there's such a massive dichotomy between the season itself and how it's portrayed on the show, and that season is Big Brother Canada 6. And I remember I rated this super low in my original BB Can season ranking, where I put a lot of credence into the show's edits, and that being a lot of the reason why it was super low. Over here, obviously, it's pretty much right in the middle of the list. And I think that's because at this point, I kind of reconciled the two a little bit better. Now, I do stand by my point that, again, most people that experience BB Can 6 are going to experience the television show, and the television show is bad. It is a complete inaccurate portrayal of the season that had probably some of the most dynamic gameplay we had ever seen on Big Brother, but instead really watering it down and giving a lot of credit to people that really didn't deserve a lot of the credit, while also really focusing a lot on sponsorships and, again, really just ruining what was a great season on the feeds. Again, I think the television product is probably the worst outside BB Can 8 on this list. While I feel like from a feeds perspective, this should be probably top 3. So again, like, rationalizing how to combine those two notions together is very tough. I decided to just put it in the middle. Again, I think this is a season that had some really interesting gameplay. I mean, the way the house was structured, with there being so many little groups that constantly switched allegiances, was really, really interesting feeds. You obviously have big moments like the Erica blindside, which is fantastic, even though perpetuated by a really dumb twist. You have Johnny saving himself at the final 9, which, again, the show doesn't properly portray, but that is one of the most insane displays of gameplay in all of Big Brother in my mind. The level of difficulty of that move to get all these different factions to agree to keep him, also making these individual factions believe that he's a weapon for them and not the other factions, despite the fact that they know that the other factions think that they also think that he is a weapon for them, again, is insane, the level of difficulty of this move that he pulls off here. But sadly, again, didn't get portrayed that well on the show. You also have the craziness of Hamza's HOH week, and Hamza as a character as a whole was a really insane one. That really insane final 8 round where the vote was flipping back and forth literally to the last second. Again, there is a lot to really like about this season. I just wish the show portrayed it a lot more accurately, as, again, in that case, I would easily bump this up at least 2 spots here. But because the television product is just so bad, it's really just tough to place it any higher here than number 6. Now, number 5, we're moving on to a season that gets a lot of mixed reception. I think mostly leaning a little bit less positive than what I'm ranking it here, though it's a season that I've always personally enjoyed, despite its issues, and that is BB Can 3. And BB Can 3 is really the epitome of when BB Can just went super crazy with twists. There was literally a twist pretty much every week of this season, to which it ends up playing a major impact on this season, where the winner of this season, and Sarah, is someone that was so greatly benefited by these twists, to where I do think it's a major aspect of why she wins the game, which is kind of frustrating in a way. But really, despite that, I feel like the ride there is still really fun. I mean, this is probably one of the most savvy Big Brother casts we'd ever seen, being a cast filled with massive fans of the show that were all playing really hard. You also have some really big moments throughout this season. I mean, the biggest of which being the Jordan blindside, which is still one of my favorite vote-offs in Big Brother history. I mean, just the moment where Godfrey jumps up and we see all the shocked reactions from everyone else. It's just an incredible moment there. So again, one perpetrated by a twist. We also have the triple eviction, which, again, people don't like triple evictions, and to be fair, I don't typically, though I think this one in particular led to really riveting TV. The fact that Brittany won HOH and targeted Diaper Alliance, particularly Zach in particular, and for Bruno to win the veto and blindside everyone by saving Zach, only to lead to her nominating Willow, one of the closest allies of her closest ally, and then Sarah end up accidentally voting Willow out. Again, it's an insane series of events that I still stand by, that the triple eviction in BB Can 3 is probably my favorite double/triple in BB Can history, at least. And really, beyond all that, we also have the really interesting gameplay of Godfrey on this season, who kind of plays this like more modernized version of Dr. Will's game, of him pretty expertly floating throughout the house, particularly in the back half of the season. And again, like, I think there's a lot to like with this season. I understand why people don't like it. I understand why massive amount of twists really harm people's opinions of it, which, again, to be fair, it does harm mine, but I still really love some of the moments that do stem from it and really enjoy this cast, which is why it's here number 5. Now, number 4, and at number 4, we're getting back to one of the more recent seasons of the show, a season that shocked me at how good it was, and that is Big Brother Canada 9, which kind of felt like BB Can getting out of this slump it had had been in, where obviously 7 and 8 were not particularly great. 6, again, was portrayed terribly. Well, 9 kind of, again, felt like this renaissance for BB Can. Felt like it coming out of having these blatant issues with inaccurate edits or twist-heavy seasons and stagnant gameplay, to where this ended up finally becoming a really dynamic season. A season filled with terrible gameplay, but really fun gameplay to watch, while also having, again, a mostly accurate edit. I mean, there were certain things, particularly the edit of Victoria, that was, again, a bit misconstrued, but still a mostly balanced edit. Not many twists, and the twists that were there didn't really play a major factor into the game. And again, just a lot of chaotic gameplay with really fun characters. You know, the likes of Kiefer, Victoria, the flip-floppiness of the trio, and them constantly changing their minds at every eviction. We also have Jed not using the veto on himself and getting himself taken out. We have Tara's underdog run towards the end, which was actually kind of interesting. We have Ty's endgame run, which, again, I criticized Ty's game quite a bit, and I still stand by a lot of what I've said about his game. However, it still made for great TV, especially considering how, like, purple he was in the first half of the season, and in the back half he becomes this, like, massive villain for the rest of the show, and him backstabbing people left and right. And again, he has some bad jury management, but that at least made it fun. We also have the fall of the Sunsetters early on. We have Kiefer surviving his back door. Again, there's so many insane things that happen through the season. It's a really fun season. Now, I will say this was initially at number 3 on the list. I did bump it down after my latest rewatch of a certain other season that I do have a bit more connection to, but still, BB 9, still incredible season. It's here at number 4. Now, number 3, again, I kind of spoiled it. It's a season that I just rewatched. At number 3, I do have BB Can 2. And BB Can 2 is a season that, again, as I mentioned in my retrospective, I always really liked it. I loved it at the time that it originally aired. As time went on, and I haven't rewatched the season since the time of BB Can 5, my opinion of it started to go down simply just due to the fact that I didn't really remember the season as well and didn't feel a connection to the season. But on the rewatch, it really just reminded me how great this season is, where it's a pretty great season through and through. I mean, early on, you have the rise and fall of Pop and Paul Jackson, which is still a really funny storyline to me. You also have the terrible gameplay of Aika, and it all culminates in her shredding the letters, and that's really fun. You have rise and fall of the first 5, which is also a really interesting storyline, along with the rise of the sloppy seconds. You have the John and Netta storyline. You have Adele, who's a fun character. Heather's story arc's really incredible. You have Sabrina as a character, and again, her moment of her yelling about good TV is still one of my favorite character moments across the series. You have Arlie's gameplay on this season of him flipping on the first 5, only be immediately taken out following that. You have Kenny, who's a really interesting character here. You have the secret power of veto and the impact that that has in the game. Again, there's so many great things throughout this season, and it all culminates in these final few weeks of this setup to Netta eventually cutting John, only for John to eventually be the one that cuts Netta. And again, it's a fantastic season through and through. I think it is a season that can seem kind of just fine on paper. I think when you're thinking back on the season, as I did before my latest rewatch, I thought of it as a good season, but I did think the likes of the next 2 seasons we'll be talking about, and even the likes of BB Can 9 just had bigger moments all around. However, I think on the rewatch, it made me remember that, no, BB Can 2 also has those great moments as well. And it is a fantastic season through and through. Amazing cast, really fun gameplay, and that is why it's here number 3. Now number 2, and these top 2 are the definitive top 2 for me. I mean, these aren't just the top 2 of BB Can. I think these are my top 2 of North American Big Brother, where it's really just kind of insane how good these 2 seasons are. However, at number 2, I am going to go with Big Brother Canada 10. And BB Can 10 was just an insane ride while it was happening. I mean, obviously a lot of it is based around the gameplay of Kevin Jacobs and how he's able to maneuver through the game, which is really impressive. But really, there's just something going on pretty much every week of this season. While the first couple weeks are just kind of okay, by the time of week 3, we obviously have the Kyle Moore HOH week, which was a complete disaster. We have then Gino backdooring Kyle, his closest ally, in week 4. Week 5, we have Kevin picking up the pieces and organizing the side to blindside Tanisha. We get the double eviction where we get so close to having a Gino blindside only for it to fall back on Jess at the last second. We get the Herman blindside where Kevin manipulates Marty into taking Herman out. We get the Moose eviction week where Marty gets so close to being backdoored only for Kevin to save him there. We then get the obviously iconic gummy bear incident where, despite the fact that Gino was offered an opportunity to not be put on the block, he then accepts it anyway, and still gets put on the block due to chance and ends up being taken out there. You have the triple eviction, which starts the downfall of Josh's game, of him blindsiding his own allies by putting up Betty and blindsiding Summer out of the game, which leads to a really turbulent week 5, where it's really a lot of back and forth with debate on who to keep between Jason Lynn and Josh, only for us to all culminate in the final 3, which is still the most mind-blowing result to a season possibly ever, where Josh blindsides his closest ally and Betty only then lose against Kevin Jacobs at the end. Again, it's an insane ride. Again, there's just so much happening on this season. And again, I think the argument between this and the next season is extremely close. I think there's actually probably more of an argument for this being the better season than the next one. However, for me personally, I feel like I was more personally connected to the next season, but these are both really incredible seasons. Again, just the series of events that occur here and the impressive gameplay for Kevin Jacobs is just really incredible, and that's why it's here number 2. And at number 1, the best Big Brother Canada season for me ends up being Big Brother Canada 5. And again, I do think in terms of the comparison between 5 and 10, I think 10 probably has less slower points. 5 is still incredible. There's not really a completely dead week across the season. Probably week 4 is the weakest of the bunch, the backwards week, which again, really just did not play out that well. It was just a terrible twist to begin with. Also, the Cassandra boot was kind of a foreshown vote there, but really everything else is incredible. Week 1 is insane, despite the fact that we didn't get to see most of it, but and the fact that the vote was flipping back and forth, and it was really decided at the very last second. We get a 7-6 vote is insane. Week 2, we have Dallas getting backdoored and him causing a lot of chaos on his way out. Right before the double, we have William almost backdooring Bruno, only for Ika to stop that at the last second and Emily to get blindsided there. We get the obviously iconic double eviction where Ika takes out Netta in what is, again, one of the best moments in Big Brother Canada history. We obviously have the impressive gameplay of Ika across this season, which was really interesting to watch, along with this really interesting arc for Netta of her coming in as this massive fan favorite and losing all that favor along the way. We have the Cindy backdoor week, which felt like a great comeuppance for what happened at the double. Then after that, it's really this massive battle between Kevin and Dimitris and Ika, of Kevin and Dimitris essentially going back to back in comps towards the end game, and Kevin continuously trying to get Dimitris and Ika out, only for the likes of Karen and Dylan to ruin his plans. And again, it's just a really fun series of events where, again, Jackie goes at the final 8, and then we get to the triple where Kevin redeems himself for BB Can 3 and wins the veto there, all while Dre completely blows up her game and is taken out alongside William. We then get the final 5 where Kevin uses the veto on Ika to put Dylan on the block, and that led to a lot of confusion. And we have Kevin's comp run, which again, typically I'm not a big fan of comp runs, but I think the way that Kevin does it on this season, and him being on the very bottom for half the game, along with how he essentially broke the game through studying a previous comps, again, it made this a lot more interesting to me. Again, I personally really love BB Can 5. I think there definitely is the argument that 10 is the better season technically, but I personally have more of a connection to 5. I feel like I had more personal investment in 5 when it was happening. And it's a season that when I rewatched it just a couple years ago, I just really enjoyed the entire ride. And because that for me, it is here number 1. But there we go. That is my updated season ranking for Big Brother Canada. Now, obviously, BB Can 12 is just starting up. We'll obviously do the typical content for that down the road. Also, I do intend on redoing my Who Would I Vote for Big Brother Canada, along with my winner ranking at some point down the road as well. Also, expect that for the other shows that I cover, and really beyond that, just expect the same style of content moving forward. But for now, that is the video. Thank you for watching.